Hey guys, this is the class review for VISC 103 for week 6. So today we'll be mostly talking about Flash. You can get to the notes from Blackboard, and so you'll see first we kind of went over why Steve Jobs hates Flash and some other disadvantages of Flash, and also reasons for using Flash. And don't forget to check out these learning resources that I've posted. So first being ActiveDen, where you can purchase pre-built apps, and we've got Flash tutorials on ActiveTuts Plus, and then website templates. Also you can purchase Flash tutorials here, and then there's Flash forum and tutorials here, and then Flixel is the Flash game development framework, and you've got Flex, which is Adobe's Flash-based application development software. So we'll just jump right in. So go ahead and open up Adobe Flash CS4. If you're using CS3 or below, there's going to be certain features you won't be able to access, such as the bone tools, the 3D animation tools, motion tweening, and let's see what else. Yeah, those are the main things we won't be able to get to. So when you start off the document, just go ahead and choose one of these first two ones. So let me just go with ActionScript 3.0. So we've got our canvas. If you need to change the size of the canvas, you go up to Modify Document, or you can see the hotkey is Command J. So we'll do that. I'm just going to set mine to 720 by 480 because that's the standard web or DVD quality pixel ratio. You can also change the background color through here. So I'm just going to keep it white, and you can set the frame rate. I would recommend either 24 or 30 frames or 12 frames per second, and I would generally recommend keeping it at pixels. And you can also make this your default. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Hit OK. Alright, if you view Photoshop or Illustrator, there are a lot of similarities. If you hold the space bar, you can drag your canvas around. Let's see, holding B is the hotkey for brush tool. And your options for the brush show up down here, so you can't really see them on my screen, so I'm just going to drag the edge over to create 2 rows of buttons. Or actually, it seems like it, yeah. And the first one we'll talk about is the brush shape. So these are the options you have. Unfortunately, I don't think you can get any other brush shape options besides those. So we're just going to stick with round, and then you can choose the brush size. They give you only a few options here. One difference you will notice with this is once I select a brush and I start painting, if I go ahead and zoom in and I start brushing again, my brush diameter is the same. It hasn't changed with this level of zoom. So, and I could zoom in even further. Oops, wrong way. And the brush is even thinner. Likewise, if I zoom out, I'm going to have a big fat brush. Okay, one other main difference with this brush tool from Illustrator is, I'm going to go ahead and select it, delete it, is all your shapes, all your brush markings, as you draw more and more, if you hold Command and click, you notice they all become one shape. Whereas in Illustrator, you would create a shape, and then you'd create another shape over top of it, and they would stay separate. So if you want to be able to do that, keep them separate, you have to convert them to a graphic, a group, or a symbol. So first we'll do grouping it. So hold Command, select it, and then press Command G, and that gives it a little teal border. So now when I draw over top of it, it maintains its shape and they don't get combined. I can do the same for this, Command G, whoops, and or I can even shift select and Command G those, so now they're one group, but then I can double click inside of it, and you'll notice here we've got this hierarchy. So if I even if I double click inside of there, so now I'm inside of scene, and then a group, and then the group inside of the group. I can create more brush effects. Select that and group it, select that and group it. So now I've got that, and I can double click inside of that as well, and you can go on for infinity until this whole thing has groups and subgroups. Okay, now besides that, there is the pencil tool, which this is a lot more similar to Illustrator. So we're actually drawing a shape here instead of creating brush strokes. And but it actually keeps it empty. So if you want to fill that in, you go to the paint bucket tool, fill it, and here is another difference between Flash and Illustrator, is you can select the fill separately than you can the border. Likewise, you can select the border, drag it separately from the fill. So there's a couple things you need to be aware of, and that is you can if I close that off and I press K to select my fill tool, you can fill that in, and but you cannot add a stroke to an existing fill. So if I click this and I tell it I want a stroke, it's not going to give it to me. So I'm not sure why Adobe hasn't fixed that, or if they think it's necessary to fix it, but I think it would be cool to be able to add a stroke to a fill like you can in Illustrator. Another thing is, while we're in the main move tool, if you move it to the edge of an object, you'll see a little curve next to our icon. You can click and drag to edit the shape without needing to click on individual points. Now if it does converge to a point, you'll see this little angle icon, and that'll treat it more like a point. However, you can switch to your other arrow tool, or you can press A to access it, and this will behave a lot more similarly to Illustrator, where it gives us points and it gives us handles. We can drag those around to edit our shapes. And while you're in this tool, your fill and your stroke are not going to separate. Alright, there's also the eraser tool, so right here, and that behaves just like the brush tool. But you'll notice when I switch back to the arrow tool, these are now separate shapes and I can handle them independently. Same with if I choose this brush tool. But if I move them back together, they have now combined into a single shape. Now if you're kind of annoyed by dragging the fill and the stroke separately, what you can do is double click and that will choose the fill and the stroke. Also, if you click and drag, you can create a rectangular selection, so you can actually just grab a section of a shape and then press delete and that'll separate it. Okay, let's see, what else are we? Let's get into gradients a bit. So for that, let's just choose an oval tool. Just going to grab an oval. So to get a gradient, you hold down Command and select the middle. If you're in Windows, it's going to be Control. Select it and then go to the fill here, and you'll see you've got some gradient options. So let's go ahead and you've got the linear and radial gradients. So we'll choose a radial for this. And you may see these controls, you may not. If you don't see them, you can access them by pressing F, and that will give you your gradient controls. But you can go in and drag the center. You can also drag the radius of the gradient, or you can squish it, make it more oval shaped. And you can also rotate it, but since, well, I guess that would only have a real effect if it was a little oblong. So if we do that, you can do that. But if you want to affect the shape of the object, the transform tool for that is Q. So if you press Q, it'll let you skew the edges. It'll let you rotate. It'll let you squash it and stretch it and scale it. You'll notice here there's a little dot, and that is our focal point for our transformations. So if I move this down to the corner or at the bottom and I rotate, it's going to pivot around that point. Same with scaling. Well, if that's only if you hold Option. If you hold Option or Alt, everything is going to be based around that point. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And there's also, I'm going to create a rectangle. If you go up into your gradient options, which are under the color palette, you can choose the type, and we've got, right now it's selected as radial. You can also choose linear. And I think you have to have your object selected. So let me select it first and then choose linear. And you'll notice it changes my options. So now with the linear, we've got these two bars which represent the two ends of the gradient, but you can also rotate it, have an angular gradient. And here you can edit the gradient itself. So if you click anywhere along here, you'll see a plus symbol. So that'll allow you to add more colors to the band. So I can make that part green or whatever. And you can also edit existing colors by clicking on them and shifting them. So I'm going to make it more of a greenish, just a dark green. Another cool thing you can do is add alpha to each one. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this, drag this over here. I want it to fade away, so I'm going to select this and then drag the alpha down, and you'll notice this grid appears. So now when I drag this over here, actually, before we do that, you need to convert it to a symbol, or you can press Command G and group it. So that way when we put it over top of another shape, you'll see that it fades away. So to edit it, just double click on it, select it, and then edit that way. And we've got this cool gradient effect. Okay. Let's move on into animation. So up here at the top, you should have a timeline. Alright, so these all represent frames. You'll see here it has the frame rate, and also it tells it in matter of seconds, and then it also tells you what frame you're on. So you can drag this, or you can actually enter a frame. But the problem is it won't let you drag any further to the right than your latest frame. So if you select that frame, you'll notice everything gets highlighted. If you drag this all the way over to 50, now we should be able to drag within here. But you'll notice everything disappears because now it's completely empty, and this gray represents that there is content on that frame. So I'm going to go ahead and click it and drag it back, and now we've got content filling this entire thing. Now before we animate anything, it's always a good idea to have, well, in fact, you can only animate something properly if it's on its own layer. And I'll show you why. So I'm at this beginning frame. If I scrub over to, I don't know, frame 50, I'm going to right click, insert a keyframe. So we've got another dot here. So these dots represent keyframes. And I'm going to move some stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and move that there and move that there. So when we go back, you'll notice it just snaps into place. And that's because all of this 1 through 49 represent a single frame. And then this is a new frame with new positions. If I try to add an animation or a tween animation by right-clicking, add motion tween, I might run into some issues. And it doesn't animate. So I need to have these on two separate layers. So before I add the keyframe, I'm just undoing a bunch of steps. Okay, so I have no keyframe here. I'm going to select this, right click, cut, create a new layer, and right click, paste in place. Alright, so now I can toggle this on and off and that on and off. Now this is still a shape, and it's not a group or a symbol, and that basically means you can, well, the way it's going to be handled with tweening is going to be different. So I'll just demonstrate. So as a shape, you can do all kinds of things like change the color, change the shape, the size. You can even have it change into a different shape. It's just going to morph from one frame to the next. So, oops, I'm going to go ahead and right click here, insert keyframe, and I'm going to press Q to get the transform tools, and I'm going to just squish it. And in fact, I'm going to drag this edge up and drag that. So we got a really random looking abstract shape. So it goes from there to there. Now we can right click, and this you need to do shape tween because it's not a symbol yet and it's not a group or a graphic. So shape tween, and you'll notice it turns green. All shape tweens are green. We'll later see that motion tweens are blue and classic tweens are purple. So now we can see it gradually changing from one shape to another. So that's pretty cool. You cannot do that with this layer. So, but what you can do, so I'm going to go ahead and insert a keyframe. I'm going to move it over, and you can even do some simple transformations. Right click here, and you notice I can't create a shape tween because I don't have a shape on that layer because it's grouped. So I'm going to create a classic tween, and it moves from one position to the next. But you'll notice it didn't capture the transformation, like in terms of the scale. It only tracked the motion detail. So I'm going to create a new layer,